Awesome. Well, I think what we were discussing today is early stage sales. Um, and I put together like a few slides. Sometimes it's helpful to just like have something like go off of and like put a list of questions in there that I usually get or that we would expect to expect folks to want to answer before they raise their Series A. Would it be helpful if I pull those questions up and then we can kind of go deeper there? Is that a good way to do this?
Sure.
If you guys have questions you want to start with off the bat, I'm open to do that as well. This is really for you guys, so.
If you find it's helpful, why not go through the few slides, then we can jump in.
Perfect. All right. So just some quick background on myself to give a little credibility to this. So this is basically a lot of what Zach was saying in his past presentation. So I built my career in early stage enterprise sales. I was the first sales hire at a company called General Assembly, at the Muse, at Sherpa. And we since launched a business to support with founder-led selling and finding a way to unlock repeatable outbound sales models. The traditional way of people doing it was, one, the founder who has limited commercial experience has to try and figure it out themselves and wade through all of the ambiguity that comes with it. Or two, you hire someone full-time, and we all know the first sales hire normally does not work out. One, because they don't bring a process to the table, but two, because the founder actually hasn't collected enough evidence to make them successful. So one of the biggest mistakes, folks make that we've seen over and over again, and I'm sure you guys have heard this, is when, with regarding to their commercial model and sales, they jump over key validation milestones, right? They try and force progress versus gather proof, right? And one of those might be, hiring someone before you yourself have closed the first 5 to 7 customers, right? Or you hire someone and all of your business to date has been generated through inbound and through your warm referral network, but you've never done it cold, right? And now you expect some mid-level salesperson to try and figure it out, which never happens that way. So we've built our model to basically embed alongside founders to build all this out and help them get their early adopting customers. All right, cool. So again, jumping ahead and skipping key milestones, I'm going to jump to this. If you guys were to define yourself, I know everyone's kind of at that seed stage, or maybe even at the Series A stage at this point, or entering the Series A stage. Are you guys more in kind of founder-led selling, still trying to validate the model, the business model, trying to see if someone's even willing to pay for this? Or are you guys now at the point where you have your first couple customers and now you're looking to find repeatability?
The latter for us.
Okay. How about everyone else?
In between.
Founder-led still.
Okay. Good, because I built the slides knowing that people were going to be in between both of these. Awesome. So this is where I want to spend most of the time. These are questions that you, as the founder, need to answer before you spend any time or money hiring anyone full-time to manage sales. Okay. So the green is if you're in that first stage, right, of founder-led selling, you need to answer all of these questions before you can move into the second stage, right? This is kind of your exit criteria to get here. If you're in this stage, right, which is process, build, and repeatability, right, here's everything you need to answer before you hire any full-time sales rep. All right, and one of the most important things, or the biggest misstep in terms of these questions we've seen, is a lot of folks will build a product, right, go deep, spend all this money in the product and the engineering until they realize that what they've built is not even technically aligned with the market they're selling into. Right? So they haven't spent the time looking at integration, security, or product needs in order for their market to even consider purchasing. Right? Another one in terms of the process side is, they'll hire someone full-time, but they haven't been able to validate the a repeatable or sustainable way to get in front of executives, right? If you're doing top-down sales. Right. So here are just some sample questions put together, and I'll let you guys kind of ask questions from here. We could dive deeper into some of these.
Yeah, I have a question on the, you mentioned the first sales hire often
Sure.
not working out. You know, some folks I've heard talk about like the Renaissance rep is an ideal first sales hire, someone that can do a little bit of everything. Others, you know, if the founders do have some selling experience, have recommended getting like an SDR or a prospector, someone who's just drumming up, you know, demand gen.
Sure.
Do you have thoughts on that first sales hire and what folks should look at?
Yeah. So that first sales hire, yes, everyone talks about the Renaissance person, right? The person that's able to help build the process and build this out so all other future sales reps are successful, right? The challenge is that the Renaissance hire is probably very sought after, right? A really good one. So in order for you to attract a Renaissance hire, you need to show that there's proof here and that they're going to be willing, they're going to be able to make money, right? A lot of people will say, hey, we've built this really cool product and, you know, we've talked to these customers and people are really excited about what we've built, but the best salespeople are going to want to see proof, right? So part of why it's so important for the founder to do this is for you to get that really rock star salesperson. You need to be able to answer these questions because a really good salesperson is going to ask you these, right? And then they're going to say, well, you can't hold me accountable if you haven't done this, right? And now you're going down a very slippery slope of moving targets. And that's kind of one of the biggest ways that people don't end up hitting their growth targets, right? Because there's limited conviction in here's exactly how many people I need you to reach out to. And here's exactly who I want you to connect with, right? It's a lot more ambiguous than that. In terms of hiring an SDR is great once you've validated everything and you have referenceable customers. An SDR is going to send out messaging that you've proven works, right? And they're good at scaling that. You should never be hiring an SDR until you have this figured out, right? Because an SDR is going to spray the market and you only have one shot with some of these folks. And you might be saying something that's not even, you know, something that the market even cares about just yet. Or something that, even resonates, right? So that's why it's so important to answer all these questions to attract that Renaissance hire, but then eventually get to a point where you can be bringing on SDRs. How are you guys kind of generating leads to date? Is it still leveraging warm network, friends and family? Is anyone going cold to try and do this cold right now?
We just started. So all of our revenue has been exactly that, like network, our own personal networks, founder networks, and we've gotten that to 30K in monthly recurring.
Okay.
But we now started experimenting with cold outreach. So we have a lead list. We have a really good sense of the kind of title of the purchasing decider at organizations.
Sure.
It's really easy for us to source that out from LinkedIn. So we've started trying to like literally over the last couple of weeks, and so far have not been successful with cold outreach. So starting to like rethink what our strategy is instead of trying to like get them into a call to action being schedule a demo with us for the cold outreach, the call to action being something a little softer around like information we can provide, like content, inviting them to a webinar, something like that. So would be interested to hear what your thoughts are around like initial call to action for cold outreach to a lead list.
So if you're doing this for the first time cold, you should be actually doing the outreach. It should be coming from the founder for two reasons. One is the only person that's going to be able to inspire an executive when you're still trying to figure out what's going to resonate with this group from a value proposition perspective, right? Because a warm network, they are either doing you a favor by signing on, or they've had a pain, right? And they've already are educated enough on this pain, right? They've raised in their hand and said, yeah, listen, I'm interested in learning more. This is something we're seeking to solve for. When you go outbound, you're dealing with suspects, right? You're reaching out to someone and saying, hey, I have a better way of working, right? And if it's not coming from the founder, why would they believe it? Right? Especially because you haven't validated the messaging, what's going to work. But more importantly, what's that unique insight that's going to inspire people at the very top end of the funnel who don't even know anything about you and don't even know if they have a problem? Right? So when you do cold outbound, the first and foremost, it should be you that are going to be closing those first 2 or 3 cold deals. And it should be you reaching out, because only you is going to be able to inspire an executive cold when you're still trying to validate a lot of the components about the outbound engine, right? So that's probably one of the reasons is the conversion. I would imagine you're probably using SDR for some of this.
So we have a Renaissance salesperson, official title like director of sales operations. So she's the person that's been operationalizing the process, but then also experimenting with cold outreach.
Yeah. An executive in a market like this is probably not going to respond to a salesperson.
Okay.
So I would recommend it's a good use of your time, especially if you're going to raise a Series A. They're going to want to see sustainable, repeatable way to generate leads. And if you go in and say, hey, we're just leveraging our warm network, that well eventually dries up and everyone knows that, which is why outbound is so critical to unlock.
And then kind of the second question was like, what, if you've seen anything, or especially in like given the present circumstances, what would you recommend, a call to action in that cold outreach to be in that kind of initial email?
Yeah. So that initial note, if you're asking for someone for 30 minutes of their time, I always recommend spending 15 minutes writing a great note, right? Because it's all about quantity. It's all about quality, not quantity, right? So when you're sending out a cold note, one, why are you reaching out to them? What specifically, why would they be interested in something like this? So you need to answer that why piece. Why them, right? Did you come across them from a podcast? Were they a part of this conference? What specifically makes it special to them so that they don't feel like this is some templated note? 2, what problem are we talking about? You can't be solution led and say, hey, let's talk about a demo, or hey, here's what we're doing. You need to say, hey, we're deeply passionate about solving X problem. Is this something that you guys are interested in as well? Or are you thinking about? Would you be open to a knowledge exchange? Right? So when you do cold outbound, again, nothing's been validated yet, so you still have to do a ton of the manual work, but you need to be problem-led, because as soon as you're solution-led, they know this is a sales call, right? So you just need to focus the call around, hey, I just want to talk to you about this problem. We're deeply passionate about it, versus, hey, I have this really interesting solution I can sell you.
Jen, I have a question.
Sure.
So we're often targeting office managers and executive assistants.
Sure.
And basically, I've always taken the approach where I try to relate to them, even as a founder and as a CEO. So I usually don't keep my title and put on a different title when contacting them. But I actually don't really know if that's the right way to go about things. I feel like sometimes CEO or founder is a little bit too intimidating. Like, why are you emailing me? And then the other side, relating to them might be more personable, but I don't know. Kind of curious what your thoughts are about that.
I would experiment. I would send some notes with your title, some notes without, and see which one performs better. I don't know the answer to that, but I would, if you're targeting executives, definitely CEO or co-founder. If you're targeting non-executives, I would say test it. Because we specifically play in top down. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I would definitely experiment.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem.
I've got a question, is whether inviting prospects kind of that you're engaging with, but they're not there yet, inviting them into kind of your product development process, showing them products you have under development to get their feedback, kind of get them engaged with your company. Have you seen that as an effective technique to get people further along down the pipeline?
Yeah. You might collect more noise. It's an interesting strategy. Listen, if they're not bought in on the pain and they're not feeling the pain and they're not like, hey, this is super interesting, we want to build this alongside you, or listen, when you get this built, we want to buy, right? You might be getting a lot of feedback that might take you down the wrong path.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say have absolute conviction in terms of what you're building and what you're learning from the market. And sure, you can maybe share some bullets to say, hey, here's what we're focused on. How is the pain manifested now with the pandemic? Like, how have priorities shifted? Is this something that you guys are still, focused in on?
Right.
Could be interesting. But sometimes you want to be careful on who you get feedback from with the product. Because I've seen it where it's taking people down the wrong track.
Right. If part of that is, okay, is the feedback because this is something that you'd want to buy, or is it just kind of casual observations, I guess, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it all depends on how you position it and the context of the relationship. I mean, if it's a matter of, hey, this is definitely something we want to do, budgets are frozen right now.
Right.
That's one context versus, hey, this is a nice to have, or hey, this has been cool, but like, we're not interested in learning more. I wouldn't follow up to those people and say, hey, let me show you what we're doing with our product.
Right. Thank you.
We're in a bit of a strange situation. So we've gained the greatest. Our technology is an edge AI computer vision technology that captures a tremendous amount of data.
Sure.
And our initial progress was with commercial real estate and retail,
Yep.
sort of an experiential marketing angle. But we have to, of course, with COVID and most of these potential customers closed for an unknown period of time, we've tried to pivot and try to sort of broadly assess where the technology can be used. And we have like this virtual idea board, I guess, where we're just throwing a bunch of things in. How do you recommend best prioritizing? We're a very lean team. How do you recommend kind of best prioritizing we have to answer these questions, probably the founder-led questions from the beginning all the way through now for each of these verticals. But how do you kind of recommend prioritizing that endeavor?
So is there one vertical you're targeting, or you're targeting multiple?
We're targeting multiple: healthcare, touchless interfaces, just a pure data collection service, which can be tacked on to an existing system or service out there. So it's a broad swath, and we're in idea generation mode to kind of keep the revenue momentum. Well, to rekindle the revenue momentum, I guess. So.
Sure. So I would recommend getting very targeted on one market, right? You can't be a horizontal product. That organically happens. You have to be very vertically focused in the beginning to build your beachhead. And the only way you're going to build repeatability is being able to have a very clear market you're going after. We speak to founders all the time that are like, oh, we've built a horizontal product. And I usually say, you haven't even built repeatability yet. How can you have a horizontal product? Just because you have one kind of a smattering of customers everywhere and they're solving for different use cases, now you're just turning into a consulting company. You're not really a product company anymore, right? So what we recommend is getting really, really focused on one target market. And that can be defined as, where's the largest TAM? Which one is the largest TAM? Where's there the highest opportunity to exploit with everything going on in the market? Who's feeling the pain the most when it comes to cost savings, growth, or speed, right? It's usually those three things that people care about, right? And which one do you have the highest time to value for, right? Who's going to be more, experimental, right? Healthcare companies are experimental in some ways, but not in others, right? Because they're highly regulated. So trying to figure out which target market to go after should be your number one priority. And then using kind of your assumptions and answering these questions to either strike it and say, there's no fit here, let's move on to the next, or let's double down and go deeper. Because once you close a customer, you want that referenceable logo, because that's going to allow you to unlock more customers within that market.
Hmm.
I have a quick question. Sorry.
Sure.
Okay. So hi, I'm Marissa. Thanks for doing this, Jen.
No problem.
And nice to meet everybody else. Regarding audience or, TAM, like my product, it does personal self-defense / security wearable. It's like a 2-finger ring that has a DNA capture. It has like fangs that come out. And then you can also like press a button for 911 and other things to happen. So it's a different market. It's the same market as wearables and Internet of Things and wearables as a service. And we crisscross across all these verticals. But when you talk about market, I could go market industry wise, or I could go market audience wise. Like I can create a segment out of women, right? Without victimizing the population, but just pointing to a problem that exists. Or I can look at the problem that exists and look at that as a market.
Yep. So it's interesting because what you're trying to do is find the segment that you're going to exploit kind of first.
Yeah.
And there's a term called the paradox of specificity, which means the deeper you can go with the insights, the more you're going to be willing to convince someone. Right? If I said like Away, right? Like the Away, the luggage company, they built luggage for everybody, right? Anyone can use luggage. What Away did that was really great was they said, listen, let's target people who are actually travel a lot for work, right? They're constantly in their airport. They're trying to find a charger for their phone. And this is a massive pain for them, right? That's where they started with their business, right? Is a very specific audience against a very specific pain, right? So with yours, while it's great because it can serve a huge addressable market, which is going to excite folks, it's also really challenging too, because now you need to start to get pinpointed on exactly where to go. So what I would look at is who has the largest pain right now within the market you're going after? Like who's constantly
COVID or like
it depends. I mean, you don't want to build a product based off of the pandemic, but if that could be your starting point to say, listen, let me get really, really clear. I know this is something they're facing every day starting today. That's interesting. But if this changes in a week, that also could hurt you.
Yeah, it's just, I guess like, I don't want to be too specific right now, but, currently like domestic abuse is up, right? And like also, rape is, they finally allowed the at-home rape test kits to be implemented currently because of COVID, but previously they were taken off the market because of at-home DNA issues. So now they're doing telemedicine with, first responders and criminal labs to really like intake these incidents. So it's interesting how it is changing, but without pivoting too much, how do you stay true to your ethos, without being too responsive and desperate within
it? So what I recommend is start with the use case. Like what's the specific use case? And then sell to that need and then frame it around the context, right? So you sell the need and the use case, right? And then you frame it around the context. So you could say something along the lines of like, we really want to solve, domestic abuse or rape, right? Against this specific use case, right? And what you're doing. And then you can now frame it in, okay, we've noticed, this is a massive problem, but here's how it's being expedited because of this that's going on in the situation.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
Hi, my company is in the recruiting space.
Okay.
So prior to this, I had a salesperson. I did founder-led sales as well. We've had 22 customers, and specifically within recruiting or for freelance remote contingent type of work. So on the talent side, we're seeing massive amounts of growth, but on the company side, very few are hiring. I don't know if it's going to be the case in about 2 to 3 months when people realize that they can bring on full time and that they need to bring on more of a consultative freelance basis. So the question is like, what do I do now in the meantime while there is still so much uncertainty?
Yep. I would try and schedule time with heads of talent and find out how are they going to rehire or how they're going to solve for this when things turn around. I would get ahead of the curve and begin to collect insights around not today, but tomorrow, and go back to them and say, listen, have you guys designed a plan of action for like how you're going to go about rehiring, right? What roles are you going to start with first, right? What's the highest priority? Why is that, right? What metrics do you use, in recruiting? Is it time to fill? Is it the quality? Like, what are your KPIs that you're going to be using going forward? Right. And I would begin to really understand how they're beginning to map this out. Maybe you can even help them figure out how to map this out and build relationship that way. But what we've seen in the customers we're supporting is top of the funnel. I actually disagreed with one of the VCs said. They said, top of the funnel is really hard right now. We've seen the highest conversions ever right now because people are open to learning. They need to show that there's a better way of working, and they need to continue to add value to their organization. They can't just be sitting on their hands. So people are out there right now learning better ways to work, learning more cost-effective ways to solve a similar challenge. But more importantly, if they're not going to be hiring heads, are they going to supplement it with some level of technology? What is that going to begin to look like, especially if they now want to flex between office and distributed, right? So there's a whole new set of problems that are arising, or pains that are arising. So it's getting really, really clear insight into what those are and how they're being prioritized, because now you can accelerate the sales cycle once we start to come out of this, and even sharpen your value proposition to play to some of that stuff as well.
Thank you.
No problem. Is anyone right now in the investigation state trying to learn from potential customers? Just trying to collect insight?
Hi again. Yeah, sorry. That's kind of where we are. And
Yeah.
We are coming off of basically what I was hearing from a lot of early stage investors who were interested, was that they didn't think that there was a model for the self-defense part of it. The panic button jewelry existed, and the wearables for safety exist, and the apps exist, like Noonlight for dating, and so on and so forth. But so we had to prove the self-defense part. And then I also had to prove the luxury part, that women would pay, or people would pay, a couple $100s for a good looking piece of jewelry that had a different function to it.
Sure.
So we proved that market. Now with this inertia, because we can't manufacture, my lab is based in Manhattan. So everyone's on pause. So now I think, it's an interesting month, April, just for awareness of violence, but we're just going to be doing a lot of polls and story taking, and just a lot of research and development, just really the most that we can do.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. No, and that's the right approach, right? Because, we're not going back to where we were. I think there's going to be some big implications on how businesses are going to react going forward. And, even business models have to shift, right? I mean, you look at Cisco, they've now just completely changed the way that they're pricing. Now, part of that is to cut out a lot of competitors, right? Because they're now using pricing power to get ahead. But, a lot of people are experimenting with their business models, with their products. But just, yeah. And I think you're doing the right thing, which is make sure you're doing it with the consumer's insights driving it. Has anyone's business model shifted at all in terms of distribution? Have anyone, been experimenting there?
From physical to virtual, you mean, or what kind of?
Yeah, just any part of the business model, whether it's distribution, whether it's how you engage customers, whether it's pricing, value prop.
Jen, I can speak here. I'm actually a student consulting for MBA student consulting for a startup on the West Coast, and they were a corporate travel management booking platform, which, as you can imagine, has been hit quite hard. There was a transaction business model, and they've pivoted now to try and be subscription first and foremost, but then also they're pivoting to sort of weight more their expense management tool.
Yeah.
So they're kind of going deep dive into sort of their current customers that were using travel and part of their expense tool that was free, and trying to work out what needs to be adjusted for them to become paying customers. And then also trying to sort of research the market and see where their product falls short. So it's a really interesting phase and been a frantic sort of 5 weeks. But yeah, I don't know if you can talk to maybe experience of the pivot, be it business model from transaction to subscription, or just a direct pivot from sort of the main business from being something like travel to now being more expense. Obviously not exactly like that, but in another example.
Yeah, sure. So have they been talking to, have they actually spoken to prospective, not current customers, but prospective customers around this as well?
Yeah, they have been.
Okay. And have they figured out, are people willing to have they sold anything? Are people willing to put money into what they
have had 3 deals closed in the last sort of 6 days.
Okay.
They're really focusing on sort of the people that weren't using a tool previously. So sort of still pen and paper Excel, very much on the smaller side, not looking enterprise anywhere near that, but just trying to find a base level of customers to get insights and then iterate from there.
Yeah. So I would say, listen, I think that's, if you have paying customers, or if they have paying customers, I would now try and find a way to begin to figure out that sustainability piece to continue to get in front of those people, right? Because
right. Or maybe but you're absolutely right. Like behaviors, like when's the next time you're going to go to a movie theater and sit in a movie theater with 150 strangers, or the gym? Like it's going to take, even when it's lifted, it's like.
Yeah, actually, Lauren and I were just discussing